he put the tree in the garden. And he knew that Adam and Eve would see it constantly and be always have it in their peripheral. And if they didn't have knowledge of good and evil, even if he said, hey, like, this is bad, don't do that, how would they know it was wrong if they didn't have that knowledge yet? It's like a kid getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar and then their parents saying, okay, I'm gonna whip you forever. Does that mean that God doesn't care as much about dogs?
This is such
that
a
dogs
tangent.
they don't matter?
Nice to meet you here. Your name is Percy, my name is John.
Hi, John.
And we're here to be provocative a little bit because we have a title that's saying something is impossible, right? But I want to hear from you, your understanding of evolution. I may surprise you. I may agree with some of the things you say. And also, I want to share with you what I mean by this, and then I want to hear your opinion. So first of all, what are you studying?
I'm a double major with a minor. I've got English, anthropology, and a minor in classics.
Wow. Okay, so we're dealing with somebody who's got a big brain, which is good news, because that's what we do like. And the other thing as well, Percy, is that would you say that you're a logical-minded person, rational thinker?
As much as any human being can be.
And you're open to, like, if somebody were to give you new information about something, are you open-minded to accept new information and examine them?
Yeah, as long as if it's scientific information, it's got double-blind kind of studies with it, as long as there is several different occurrences of it being agreed upon.
In other words, you're open-minded to accept something that's been proven, that looks rational and looks logical. Now, what I'm going to present to you today,
I will say,
yeah, sure,
there are lots of instances where stuff looks logical or looks like it's familiar, and then people kind of jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do that, and I think it takes a lot of time and effort to make sure that the information is valid.
So that's kind of like saying manipulation is easy to do to people, isn't it? You can manipulate them into thinking something.
Yeah, misinformation is easy to accept, especially if it's given to you immediately, and you read it and you're like, okay, this makes sense to me, and now, it's not proof or anything.
Now we're a Christian organization, so nobody could care more about making sure that people are not deceived, they're not lied to, and that we're not twisting facts. Nobody will be more interested than us. We are driven by a different kind of passion. We're driven by the passion that we want people to know the truth. It's the mountain we die on. It's the truth is necessary. What I'm doing here is mathematical. So it's a mathematical, numerical study which we haven't done. This is not our work, it's somebody else's work. It's a population genetics individual who is well known, he's praised for his intelligence, he's known throughout all the scientists, and he's always been told he is one of the best scientists that exist. So he's the Einstein of scientists today. So when he says something, then people should pay attention to it.
Can I ask who this is?
Yes, his name is John Haldane.
Okay, I want to look that up.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you what he's saying, and then spend all your time looking it up, right?
Okay.
I mean, this is not going to be something I'm going to corner you with now, and then you're going to say, hey, I want to look it up, and then say, no, you're not allowed. I'm not going to do that. So let me take you through it. There's not a lot of material about him, but you will find some.
John Haldane?
John Haldane. No, that's not him.
Okay.
We'll come to that in a minute, and I'll show you where to look.
Okay. I want to make sure that I want to look at it later.
I
see
agree.
What you have to say.
That's a healthy mind. That's how you're thinking. And thank you for doing that. So, now, first of all, tell me something. Different people have got different definition for the word evolution. So when somebody says evolution, what is it in your mind that you're thinking when they say that?
Well, there are several different types of evolution that you kind of think of when dealing with different fields. So there's genetic evolution. There's thinking of the morphology of evolution. There's thinking of the biological anthropology of evolution, where they all have a slightly different thing depending on the needs of the field.
Yeah.
So
they can even talk about car evolution, because cars go from good to better and so on. So I understand that there are different areas. I'm talking about genetics evolution. So I'm being specific.
Genetic evolution is basically when a population with several different genotypes is selected for with a phenotype that is more helpful in that environment and to adapt to it.
And tell me what you think about Darwin when you're thinking of evolution, and do you agree with him?
I would say yes. He went on like the Beagle, which was very interesting, going for 5 years, looking at a bunch of different places all around the world, and he noticed this differentiation with finches. And of course, he later goes on specifically on like pigeons and stuff, where he looks at the environment and realizes that these finches have very similar characteristics. They're all the same kind of genus, but their species is different, and why that occurs. And then you can tell from like their beak shape and different other things about their body, where it's like, oh, this one is much better at eating nuts, and so they have the bigger beak for it. This one is much better at eating insects, and so have a thinner beak, and da da da. And looking at that similarity and where they divulge is very cool.
Yes. So Darwin believed in adaptation and selection, natural selection, which produce a variety within species. Okay, so that's Darwinism. What is neo-Darwinism?
Neo-Darwinism, I'm not as sure. I'm pretty sure it's going into the specifics of genetics and like those different fields, as I said, but I'm not sure.
You're not far off. You're not far off. So I'm going to tell you what they are, and then we're going to talk about that. So Darwin came up with the idea that there are variety within a variation within a kind, and that's called adaptation within the environment, which then become through natural selection, species change from one to another. Then they discovered the DNA. The discovery of DNA happened within like a decade of his book when he first wrote it, and then it got developed, and eventually we knew exactly what the DNA is in early 20th century. So it was quite known by then. We know what DNA is. We have people like Gregor Mendel came along and he told us about it all, right?
With his pea plants?
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to fast forward a little bit and go into 1953 when they discovered that the DNA is a double helix. That's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And now neo-Darwinism kicked in and they said, now we know how adaptation is taking place. It's actually new things come along through mutations. Does that ring a bell? Mutations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Darwin didn't actually know the function of
That's exactly right.
mutations. He knew that it was happening, he just didn't know genetically.
Yeah, he didn't know genetically what's happening, so he explained it in natural adaptation and natural selection. Okay, so DNA came along and they discovered that actually the way things change is that if you don't have mutations, nothing changes. So human stays human, monkeys stay monkeys, dogs stay dogs.
Well, even with mutation, there's like a certain level of you can stay within the species. Of course, there's different types in variation. Mutation is the complete new, like there's nothing before like this, but there's still like differentiation within genotypes and stuff like that.
This variety that comes out of the DNA is part of the DNA function. So everybody recognized that and they said, now we know how it works. Mutation changes the way the DNA works, the information in the DNA, which causes species to change from something they are not to something else. That's how they discovered it. So anyway, this is neo-Darwinism. And it's quite a good idea of trying to explain how things change.
Of course, part of that is also just, it might be a separation of the species, and then like this one has a certain type of genotype or phenotype more so than this one, and it's better adapted.
Can we make definitions clear? You said genotype, which we understand means genetics. You said phenotype, which is the characteristic of an organism, how it behaves. So you see the outworking of it. So phenotype changes nothing unless you believe in Lamarckism.
Lamarck?
Yes.
Yeah, Lamarck.
You get my point. So phenotype doesn't really change anything. We got the genotype that does the changes. Okay, so we got mutations that are taking place.
Phenotype actually can change a little bit depending on the environment.
Oh, phenotype is the outworking of your DNA. You see what the characteristics of the DNA. Okay, so here it comes. So this incredible guy who is praised by almost every, I'm going to say almost because I don't know every scientist, but every scientist I know of praises this one guy. His name is John Haldane. So in 1953, they discovered the helix structure of DNA, and then here comes this guy called John Haldane, who is the genius of genetics. He's a population geneticist, so he knows everything. 1957, he said, now I know how DNA works and mutation changes things from one to another. I'm going to work out how fast evolution works.
I will say
yes,
that with evolution, the way that it works is less like, oh, there is a direct path that we know is going to happen. With evolution, it's kind of wonky because it's just depending on what works best for that environment. If there's a very, very big environment shift, you can see these mass extinction events. And then like very quickly, speciation will happen and adaptation because there's all these niches open.
Of course.
So there's a lot of variation.
No, I agree with that, but ultimately, in order for something to change from one type to another, from one kind to another, mutation kicks in. That's what neo-Darwinism is all about. So there's no escaping that mutation is the way things work. That he didn't doubt it, nobody doubts it today, and all the scientists today work on that basis. Okay, I'm not denying that environment makes a difference. In fact, natural selection and genetic drifts, they all come into this.
I know. What I'm trying to get at is that even through mathematics, there's an element of chaos that cannot quite be numerical.
Well, not according to this guy. Okay, so this guy who studies this stuff, he's telling us what we should believe. And he's doing the calculation. Unless you don't want to accept it, that's fine. But I'm telling you what he said. I'm going to show you what he came up with and the consequence of what he came up with. You know enough about genetics to understand what I'm going to show you. And I'm happy you telling me you disagree with it, but then you're disagreeing with the guy, not me. Okay, I'm the delivery boy. All right.
Of course, like I understand there's an importance to have a faith in science, but looking at making sure that those are peer-reviewed elements, that it can be replicated, that other people can see and remake what is going on.
Yeah.
And there's an issue with having the theoretical and seeing it with the reality.
And of course, Haldane was not sort of foolish enough not to know these facts, right? So I'm going to be more respectful towards Haldane, John Haldane, who lived and died an evolutionist, by the way. Okay, so he found this. He didn't change his mind. Okay, so I'm saying what he found and eventually became known as Haldane's dilemma, that he could not resolve and nobody else has resolved it since. Now I'm going to give you a heads up here. Some people have said he solved the dilemma. I checked into it and you'll be shocked what they did. In fact, I don't think anybody knows how the dilemma was resolved, and if they were to discover it, they will find out that humanity would have been wiped out. It is very strange that people put very little effort into these studies. So I'm going to show you now. You know that humans have got DNA.
Yes.
So what base pairs? You know what base pairs are, yeah?
Yeah.
Genetically.
To like the G to C, A to T.
You got it. Absolutely 100%. Well done. How many of those have we got?
Oh, I don't know about the actual number of like DNA sequences. I know that we have like a certain amount of genomes, which is like 23, but I don't know.
You mean the chromosomes?
Chromosomes,
23
yeah.
23 pairs, it's no problem.
We have a lot of genomes.
Yeah. Look, you know already 100% more than many people we've met. So I'm very happy with the knowledge you've got. So I'm going to tell you a number, and I think you're going to agree because you would have heard this number elsewhere. 3 billion base pairs. Does that ring a bell to you?
It might. I'm kind of tired today.
Don't
honestly.
worry. Don't worry. So I don't want to push you in any way. If you get too tired, just let me know.
It's okay.
Now, they tell us we came from ape-like creatures, that we are cousins with chimpanzees and Lucy and things like that.
Yeah, we have a common ancestor, a node that where we branched off from.
Exactly.
This place.
So that John Haldane believed the same. So what's the difference in between an ape-like creature and a human? It's a study that is very small. Can you
like a 0.4%? Like it's little.
I'll show you quotes later. Today, we say 15.62%.
Oh.
Which is big. But only a few years ago, maybe a couple of decades ago, they said 1%, 1 or 2%.
Because I remember, I'm pretty sure it's with like orangutans, it's like 94 point something percent. And then with chimpanzee, I think actually I misspoke, it's like 98.4%.
Yeah, that would be more in line with what people would say. Yeah, absolutely right. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go with 1% because that is the smallest figure and nobody will complain about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the deal. This is what John Haldane is doing, right? He's working out figures. And to be honest with you, I've changed some of the figures to make it easy for me because it makes it easier for me. Like I didn't want to put 15.62%, right? 1% is easier for me. So 1% of 3 billion would be roughly how much? You don't have to be accurate. Just tell me what you think.
Oh, like 1% of a billion is probably like, a million, 100,000?
You know what? You're on the right track. So
I can't do mental math.
Don't you worry. It's 30 million because it's kind of like if you take 10% of 3 billion and then take another 10% of, then you get the 30 million. Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 3 billion, difference is 1%, therefore we have the difference of 30 million. So in order to make this bloke change to this bloke, we need 30 million changes. Because otherwise, how would you get there, right? It needs 30 million changes. Okay, that's great. Here's the bit that is going to blow everybody's mind. Okay, so how many years ago do you think that started changing from an ape-like creature to a human?
What is it? It's like it's probably around a couple million years is when a lot of the different stuff started.
You know
branching
what?
off.
I mean, I would agree that that's what they say. And in fact, some say 5 million, some say 6 million years. Okay, but I'm going to go with 10 because then we're totally safe. There is no way I could be wrong if I went with 10.
I
That
will
gives-
say modern humans came around like 200,000 years
Yes,
ago.
but that would be different. This would be talking from ape-like creature. You kind of change. The 200,000 is kind of the recent.
The thing that's weird is like, okay, how different is ape from human?
yeah.
Where like the DNA, because we're technically still primates.
Yeah.
We're old
Sure.
old worlds.
Well, I want you to think about this after we finish. Yeah? So 10 million years gives you plenty of time. 200,000 gives you very little time, so we don't want that. 5 or 6 million is more time, but it's not good enough. We're going to go 10 million, and that's safe. Okay, so how many years is every human generation?
That one's kind of hard to do because then you're trying to like shift the way that humans work. It could be between like very young and pretty old.
Yeah.
I would say average maybe like 20. 20
That is so fantastic. That is really, I'm going to go with 20. Some people think it's 30, like Moto Kimura. It came up with 30, and Richard Dawkins comes up with probably 25 years. Different people come up with different. This is the rate at which we reproduce, not when we die. You understand
Yeah.
that. So 20 years is a good safe number because it gives you more generations. That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
This is the bit that's going to probably tax your mind a little bit harder. All right, and this is the last thing, and then we come to a conclusion. I know the answer to this. The answer you're going to come up with, I'm going to give you the best answer on the planet. But that's not the answer that John Haldane came up with. All right? So I'm going to give you a good answer that will satisfy you. But you tell me first, how many beneficial mutations do we get every generation? Now, you and I both know that we get harmful mutations, we get neutral mutations, but I'm talking about beneficial mutations. How many per generation?
Well,
Or how many generations to get one good one?
to be honest, it's very different because every individual is literally an individual. Everything is different about each person. So everything changes a little bit per person.
Yes.
So I wouldn't personally know, but it's really interesting to think about like your genetic code. You and I are the same species, but we have something so small that makes us completely individual.
Agreed. Yeah.
So technically you could say every generation there's some sort of mutation, there's some sort of adaptation.
We're talking beneficial.
Beneficial. I'm sorry. I tend to talk.
Don't walk too far because I want you to say in camera.
Sorry. A beneficial mutation. Really, that just depends on the environment and what's considered beneficial at the time.
Sure. And I mean, can you guess? I mean, you will not be criticized for not knowing. I promise you.
know.
Okay, you don't know. I'm going to tell you the best case scenario, but then I'm going to tell you what John Haldane came up with. Okay, so the best case scenario is that we have one beneficial mutation in society every single generation. That is like an incredible outcome, right? Because some people would argue there is no such thing as a beneficial mutation because they all come at a cost. Because you'll be good at one thing, but you're bad at something else.
Yeah, bipedalism is weird like that.
Yeah, I'm ignoring that. I'm going to ignore the fact that it comes with some fitness costs. I'm going to go with all-out beneficial. You can't be nicer than that. I'm trying to be the best I could be. So there you go, you get it one. Now, to work out how many mutations we have from 10 million years, 20 years per generation, and a beneficial mutation every single year, whether it's true or false. It doesn't matter, and I'm going to work out the numbers. Are you good with numbers?
No.
I'm going to show you the answer. The answer is 500,000 beneficial mutations. Percy, how many do I need? How many do I need?
To get from an ape-like creature?
I need.
So I don't think part of it is mutation completely, because part of it is
Before we get to that, let's just be black and white for now, and then tell me all out what you're thinking. Yes.
Get from that to here.
From A to B, we need 30 million, but
Base
what have we got?
pairs.
500,000. This mathematical fact is a fact. There is nothing we can change, but it gets better. And please remember, Percy, I did not do this. Okay. Who did this? What's his name?
John
Haldane.
Haldy.
You got
I'm
it.
not great with
Okay.
names.
So I'm going to
either.
tell you what he said now. This is the answer he gave population genetics, right? So to be honest with you, Percy, you can tell me whatever you want after this. Unless you've studied what he studied, I'm going to go with him.
Okay.
I have more respect for this guy than you have for this guy.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to go with this guy. So
right.
this is it. This is what he came up with. He said it's not one beneficial mutation every generation, because every generation has a cost of survival, cost of disasters, cost of illness, people dying, cost of how many do you produce. He worked it all out, and if you're interested, I will give you his paper. Okay?
All right.
Because you look like your mind works that way. I'll give you his paper. You have to be a mathematician as well, because the guy was a genius. That's why they liked him so much, because he's a genius. So anyway, his calculation is one beneficial mutation. Do you know how many generations to get one beneficial mutation? Yes.
20.
300.
300. Okay. That's a different number.
but you can see the problem, right? Okay, so this is what he came up with. 300. What's the number you get? For 10 years, 20 years per generation, only one per 300 generation, you get what?
That many mutations.
And do you see why it became Haldane's dilemma? And nobody could solve the problem. And it's still a problem today, and no one knows. Do you think, let me ask you this, Percy. This is a university. Do you think in a healthy university that studies genetics or teaches genetics, where science is supposed to be upheld and taught and not to deceive people, do you think they should tell them? Do you think they should tell them or not?
I would say in a classroom, it is a good thing to have like the different ways in which people opposed.
Do you think
evolution.
teachers should teach students the facts about 300 generations, not 300 years, 300 generations, that's 6,000 years, 300 generations for one beneficial mutation? Do you think they should tell them that?
The thing is, evolution has been like tried time and time again as a theory and said like, oh, okay, this like it still works. It still works.
So there is a problem here.
So yeah.
This is why this is a dilemma.
Yeah.
Can you see it? But we changed the definition of evolution, so I want to correct it. Because we talked about evolution and the definition.
The thing is, I think there's a difference between what mathematical theory has and then in the reality of what human and life can do.
You know what? Amen to that. 100%. Here's the problem. In reality today, tell me honestly, how many beneficial mutations do we think we have?
The thing is, beneficial mutations, like as in different from ape. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying we're humans now, and we have mutations. How many have we got at the moment?
From like the last common human or last common ancestor.
As long as you can go back.
We probably have a ton of different.
That ton is 1,000. Do you think we got 1,000 beneficial mutations happened in the, say, recent history since we've been recording it?
To be honest, in the way that we work, I'm not sure if beneficial mutations can be counted like that.
Okay, he thinks you can. So obviously you have to go with the experts here. The experts are telling us something different. Do you want to hear something more interesting?
The thing is, I feel like this is a bit of an appeal to authority, which is somewhat...
A fallacious argument?
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
because the thing is, if he's the only one who did it and the only one who knows, where is that reproduction of this data? Yeah. Where is the other people, like other very high scientists that you are praising, like him, that also agree with this work?
I like what you said. Appealing to authority, you're obviously intelligent. You obviously understand what logic looks like. The problem here isn't appealing to authority. The problem is appealing to false authority is the problem. He is a good authority. He's got some authority and knowledge, but don't take his word. This is what happened next. Do you want to know what happened next?
All right.
Other scientists kicked in.
Okay.
They kicked in, and they had a problem with it. They couldn't resolve the problem. And then eventually a Japanese guy somewhere, his name is Moto Kimura, came up with the answer. He said he was right. So he came up with a new one, and I know you're going to know this because you would have heard it. He came up with a neutral theory of evolution and genetic drift. So he agreed. He said natural selection is dead. People who believe in what he came up with, they're considered neutralist. They believe in neutral evolution. In other words, you get neutral mutations, and through neutral mutations, something different happens. So here's my problem. My problem is this. Everybody happened to agree with him, but the teachers are not telling anybody. And even Richard Dawkins, when he comes along and he tells you how the eye is developed, he talks about mutations and natural selection when it was refuted in 1957. it doesn't work. But it gets more interesting. I don't know if you want me.
1957, has it been like reproduced? Has there been like relooking at the data or relooking
They've
at
been trying to solve it for 50 years. They've been trying to work on it for 50 years. So they've not been able to solve it. The data is proving him right because we don't have any beneficial mutations at the moment. This should blow your mind. This should be the point where you say, I can't believe I'm not being told the truth.
I will say this is very interesting information. The thing is, there's so much backing up what evolution is.
Right, we're going to define evolution. Evolution, from what you're saying, has a different meaning to what I'm saying. So let's define it. I believe evolution does happen, but it doesn't happen.
I have $1,000 now?
No, that's not it. Because there's a definition of evolution. But that was very quick and very good.
Dang.
Evolution in the sense that there are small changes that occurs that gives us a different variety, genetic diversity, which comes as part of the design of the DNA. The DNA does not change. What changes is that the way you mix the alleles together, allele frequencies, produces different variety, diversity within genetics. I feel, this is where the problem is, that people who are talking about evolution, they say we see it today. What they're seeing is diversity. Diversity is part of the DNA. Neo-Darwinism said the only way you can change an organism from one species to another is by changing it through mutation. And the problem is we don't see it through mutations. We see it through genetic diversity.
I would say that with that mutation, there is then that variety within a mutation.
Now, before you continue, you said mutation twice. So you said with that mutation. Which mutation?
Sorry, I was referring to what you said.
I said there is impossible for you to change the species from one type to another, from one kind to another, without mutation. But you can get it through genetic diversity, which is part of the functionality of the DNA.
The thing is, the way that works is mutation is this kind of thing that just happens. It's random at any point. You can't quite
Agreed.
say that it's just one per or like two per. It doesn't have like just a mathematical, it's not regular like that. And of course, within a mutation, it might be like, oh, now you have an extra set of teeth. Like now you have two more molars instead of, I don't know, one. And so the way that works is then there can be variation within that mutation, making so like the bicuspids are.
We don't believe these are mutations. That is where the problem is. So it is important you check it. So we're saying those teeth were there before, unless there was a mutation called a duplication. Duplication don't normally have a function, right? You can have a sixth finger. That doesn't have total functionality.
I don't know if duplication is the same with like the actual genetic code and then like
duplication.
The physicality.
Duplication is a known mutation.
No, I know it's a known mutation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's duplication of teeth or physical aspects. It just means that the specific like AGG or something is duplicated
That's
twice.
called a substitution. When you change it,
it's not changed. It's just there's another one. That's duplication. So AGG.
That's an insertion. That will be an insertion.
Yeah, an insertion. That's a duplication.
Insertion is like a disaster for DNA. If you have an insertion in your DNA, you change all the codons.
Well,
the whole thing is to change your protein is dead.
Insertion is only one. So duplication is all three because that codes for an entirely new protein. Right. And so that has like a different thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got
Are you
caught
with
up
me?
on that.
Are you with
Yes.
me? Okay. So the point is this. When we're talking about genetics, then we can work with numbers because these are facts, these are numbers. I'm saying that he discovered that it takes 300 generations for one mutation to occur. And that is a fact. Now, maybe at some point it's 310. Maybe another point is 290. We're not arguing that. We're talking on average is that it's 300 generations per mutation. But I don't even mind giving him one per generation. You see, the problem is I'm going way beyond the Call of Duty because when I did this earlier,
yeah, you had.
I had one. I said one, and even then we couldn't work. So the problem is this: if we are extremely generous and we give it one mutation per generation, which is way outrageous because we don't get that, then we still can't make it work. Are you following me?
Yes. The thing is, what I'm saying is that mutation isn't necessarily working that way because like a mutation might just be, okay, you are now like kind of bipedal. This is like the difference way. And then adaptation starts to create variation within each one. So like now you're bipedal, maybe like the way that your spine is connected to your head.
But
That
ultimately, the numbers have got to match.
so
Ultimately, according.
I think what you're doing is you're putting mutation at too high a point. I think that it would work maybe with that amount of
And you know what's
mutations.
interesting? You're putting adaptation at a high point. So I'm putting mutation high, and you're doing the same with adaptation.
I
So
think,
so
yeah.
let's go with the experts. The experts, that's not just one, all of them. No one is confused about this. There is no confusion about neo-Darwinism, the fact that mutation changes something. I don't have a problem with adaptation. I don't even have a problem with mutations. Ultimately, through adaptation, the one with the beneficial mutation survives. But what we're saying is that we don't have enough beneficial mutations. So you need to focus on the beneficial mutations. We don't have enough.
Okay, this is where I think my issue is coming from.
Right, tell me.
With that 30 million base pairs,
Yeah.
I think it's assuming that then you have to have like a certain amount of these traits that are beneficial, but you don't have to have beneficial traits at all for this to change. You just need a few mutations to be beneficial in order to have those like changes that create it from ape-like to human.
Sure, but the problem
I
here.
think what it is that you're
So
using.
you don't need 30 million? Is that what you're saying?
Well, 30 million base pairs, that's like
So-
10, so then that's like 10 million different proteins. And those proteins, you're just saying this is the difference between DNA. DNA difference, like we still share like 50% with a banana. Like a lot of that is always going to remain the same. Just because that's how life works, how multicellular beings work.
So you're saying you think Haldane got it wrong?
Yeah, I think
So you don't respect Haldane enough to believe that he got it right?
it's not that I don't respect it. I think what it is that he was trying to numerically do something without fully understanding how the genetics. Because you said he was a geneticist or a mathematician.
Population, both.
Population geneticist isn't the same as like an evolutionary.
It's both. He was an evolutionary biologist as well.
I think then what he was doing was, you said he didn't believe it later on himself.
So
what he, I think, was doing was looking at the math and then being like, I wonder if I could make this into a numerical problem and see what happens. The thing is, that's not how.
So why do you think
works.
people called it the dilemma? Why do you think the scientists did that?
Okay, I'm going to bring in something else, but it's going to explain my point, I hope.
Okay.
Do you know the thing with like alpha males in wolves?
Okay.
So the scientist who did that went out and he looked at all these different wolves and he noticed that there were certain wolves that were much more powerful and dominant. Yes. And he said, okay, so there's an alpha wolf and there's a certain hierarchy. And he produced a book on it, and a lot of people loved alpha wolves and they thought it was so cool. And then about 15 years later, I don't know, it was a good amount of time later, he went back and he looked at kind of the same wolves, same type, same area, and he looked at it and he's like, oh, I made a mistake where I assumed that it was alpha males in some sort of hierarchy. It was in fact family units.
Sure.
And these were parents helping their children. And so he went back and he said, there's no such thing as alpha wolves. I was wrong. I promise. And everyone didn't believe him
Percy,
because they liked.
It sounds like you're going to stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I tell you, right? Because it sounds like you will actually reject an expert over your own opinion.
The thing is, it is one expert in a flood of several different experts that say that he would be wrong. And the reason
Nobody
why
said he was wrong.
But like
Nobody said he was wrong.
I think,
But you're saying he was wrong. Let me ask you this.
I think his math is fine. I'm saying the conclusion from the math is wrong.
Okay, so it sounds to me.
And I think he agreed with that because he had a different conclusion.
Tell me this, and I really am saying this with the greatest kindness. It sounds to me you religiously believe this. But if science is what we care about, if numbers matter to you, then you wouldn't have a problem with this. Why is evolution so important to you?
I think part of it is because part of it's in my study.
Okay.
But the way
so
that
you've been trained to accept it no matter what.
But the thing is with science that's different from religion is that science is actively questioning itself and going, okay, is this real?
You just simply refuse to question it.
What?
You literally told me that he is wrong.
Well, I did go through. I went through my knowledge. I went through everything that
Agreed.
I studied. I went through, and the thing is,
Is there anything wrong with this?
So the thing is, you're asking me, and I'm not a mathematician.
Right.
I'm not like a certified
Yeah.
person in this. And while, yes, this might have been within a community, there's this wider range of
Tell me,
context that I'm missing.
who is qualified? Who is qualified, in your opinion, to actually to agree with this? Who is qualified to agree with this?
I would say no one person. It would have to go up against several different blind
Nobody
studies.
disagreed with him.
Well, are there any studies going on?
Absolutely. Everybody agreed with this guy.
Well, can I see the studies?
Well, of course, you can research and find out for sure. And I can send you the papers as well because I've got them all.
And the thing
But the
is-
point is, I am fascinated because you're a student. You should go where the evidence leads, but you were fighting it like if it was an absolute lie.
I think part of it is
Tell me what
because
it is.
everyone has their own sense of self and what they've learned and what they've
Right.
gone through. And everyone thinks they're
But
right.
that
Of
sounds
course,
like
no one-
brainwashing.
Well, everyone has that. That's just a problem with humanity, is that everyone
Thank you
thinks
for
that,
admitting that. What would I do if I was Galileo and I wanted to show you that the sun doesn't spin around the earth? It sounds like I could never change your mind because I will bring you facts and you will just dismiss it no matter what. Isn't that how close-minded people end up learning nothing? How would you
say
learn
so.
something new? How?
I would say, though, that part of it goes into willingness to listen and willingness to argue about it and debate.
Right.
And of course, there are Greek philosophers who thought about that, especially Sophocles, who thought a lot of main issues could be.
So how do you, tell me something, Percy, how do you think we can change people's minds so that their eyes open up and go where the evidence leads rather than argue blindly without knowledge regardless of what you tell them? How do you make that change?
I think part of it is just without context, being in the middle of like my school. I was going to go get lunch.
Yes, sorry.
And I see, no, you're fine. I came over here. I was willing.
Yeah.
But going in without any context, and of course, part of it is just that's a lot of knowledge to go through. And I'm going on the basis of what I've learned and going through what I have observed in life. And it doesn't seem, it seems to contradict this evidence. And even though it might be that this mathematical presence is true, if we look around and we see that that isn't the reality, but only theory, then we have a
you know what's
problem.
interesting, Percy? This matches reality, and yet we deny it. Here's the thing:
What reality?
the
though?
fact that we don't get any beneficial mutations that
But
we can
this is
observe
talking about a history that we've never seen.
based on today's observation.
Today's observation, but
That's how
today's,
science works.
yeah, and today's observation also agrees with evolution.
If it doesn't match, then you have to reject it.
Well, if you go on pure like observation and seeing through history, there's a difference, I think, between looking at mathematical
Yes.
proofs of just looking at the numbers in such a regularized way.
So, Percy, I want to ask you this question. If I was dealing with an open-minded person who's willing to go where the facts go, I think they would say, I'll go and investigate and find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you didn't say that
And I
once.
would
by
like
the-
to- I would like
You
to
didn't say
know.
that once during our discussion. It's okay because
Well, I wanted to look up the guy.
that's fair. That's
I know.
fair.
I understand where you're coming
I
from.
want you to say, what I want students to do is to say, I'm happy to look at the facts and I'm happy to change my mind if the facts match.
And I think it is important to have these showings of like, okay, so here's what here's what a certain scientist believe, and this is like a big problem for people who argued for evolution, and this is why they say it's not a problem, and this is why they say.
So, just to make it clear, I believe that evolution, in the sense that there is a variety within a kind, happens all the time. And you're confusing that with the fact that we came from an ape-like creature that doesn't happen all the time, it doesn't happen ever, proven by evolutionists, people who believe in evolution.
Wait, are you saying that those ape-like creatures never existed?
No, there is no such thing as ape-like creatures. There are chimpanzees, there are...
But we have fossil records of these creatures, and you can see the changing within
can you
these
name
bones.
one? Can you name one of them?
So there's stuff like Australopithecus.
Okay, that's Lucy. So could Lucy just simply been an ape?
No, because you can see actually that she was starting to stand up on her legs.
Starting to stand up? Maybe that's an ape that's standing up.
No, it's the way that actually their bones and their like their spine and the way that it's centered on your skull.
Did you know that most of the bones were not found?
No, I'm pretty sure I've seen
They
a
were
lot.
all over the place. Let me
The thing is,
explain this for you.
But you only need a certain amount to see. Like you only need the skull to see where it's placed on your.
So maybe that's
What's it called? It's like a maxim mark.
maybe that's just one kind of monkey that was able to walk. Maybe that was the case.
But the thing is,
Why do we have to have evolved from that monkey?
it
Why
doesn't-
could we just not simply exist because of its own right.
I
It's
think-
kind of like finding a motorbike in a ditch and saying, well, that's where cars came from because look, I found a motorbike. Why can't the motorbike just exist?
Well, that's different because, of course, there's like human stuff involved, and we create.
No,
we
it was an
can't-
analogy. That was an analogy.
Yeah.
So, Percy, let me ask you this. I want to encourage you to open up your mind, to have a look at this.
Okay.
No scientist said he was wrong. No scientist went out of his way and say he was wrong. Yet you are saying that, and you seem to have less authority than them. You're appealing to yourself. That's not only illogical. That's
I don't know if
that's
I'm
a
appealing to
circular
myself,
reasoning.
but my professors. But I still understand it's an authority thing.
Yes, that would be a problem. Let me leave you with this thought. Do you think this baffles you a little bit? This is like weird. It's contradicting everything you believe in. Is it causing kind of like a conflict in your mind? I can't reconcile this with what I've already accepted.
I don't know if it's baffling. I can understand definitely the way that the numbers are working.
No,
I
not
think
baffling in your understanding. I know you understand it, but I'm asking, does it baffle you that the figures don't match everything you believed in?
not really. I think sorry. It's just sort of like just because I don't have a mathematical background and stuff.
Numbers.
Numbers?
These are straight numbers.
Straight numbers.
You know,
yeah.
30 million is not the same as
Well, the thing is, how did he
1,667.
get this number? Like, what math did he get? Like, yeah, he used these numbers, but what formulas?
You want to see the formulas? Will that change your mind?
Maybe.
Okay, I'll show you the formulas. I promise I'm going to do it right now, and it's going to blow your mind. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. But
I just like talking about evolution. I just think it's a very interesting.
yeah, I'm going to show you the formulas because you obviously like formulas. And the
I'm
formula.
not sure if I'm going to understand that. Once again, I'm
But
not.
in that case, go with what the experts are telling you. This expert, who is better than any other expert you know, who has not been refuted by any expert, is telling you these are the facts.
The thing is, with that, there's still this importance on experts. And since experts disagree, or maybe they just didn't look at his because they think this isn't worth my time.
I
this
am
isn't worth-
seeing a very committed evolutionist here who's not willing to change. That's what I'm seeing. But that's okay because I expected that. You know why I expected that? Because I believe students have been brainwashed to the point that there is nothing I can tell them to change their minds, including another scientist who's better than all the other scientists that have been never refuted.
But the
You
thing
stick
is,
to your gut.
better than all the other scientists. What does that mean? There
He's more knowledgeable.
He's more knowledgeable, but
Here.
in what? No one can be more knowledgeable than everyone else in every science.
Here we go. You know when you said, show me the formulas,
Yeah.
was it going to make a difference? Is it really going to make a difference? Tell me the truth. You said, I'll see the formula.
Actually, can I look at him?
Yes, of course you can.
Sorry.
Do you want me to send them to you?
That might be a good idea.
I'll take your details and I'll send them to you. I'll send you the whole PDF.
Okay.
It's his work, not mine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're allowed to see them. In fact, you'll see most of those formulas on Wikipedia. So it's not like it's hidden from people, public. So, Percy, you can believe what you want. Apart from if it leads you to believing that we have no intrinsic value. Because
I
obviously,
would say that's wonderful because we can make our own value. If we start without
do
anything.
you know the problem with that?
No.
The problem with that is that there are sick people out there who make up their own value.
But that's going to happen no matter what.
And therefore, it's not a good idea to have your own value. Because if you make that as a
That's
definition,
the thing is, that's putting exception on the rule, like making the exception the problem of the rule. I think in general, we're all good people at the heart of it.
would you say you're a good person?
I don't know. I would like to say.
I'm going to do
I try my best.
I'm going to do a quick test and then I'm going to let you go because I don't want you to think I'm going to keep you forever. I'm
I
going to
know.
do this.
I'm sorry.
one.
I'm also engaging this. I'm very excited.
You're liking it? Okay, fantastic. I'm liking it too. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for being patient. I appreciate
Of course, and you're being patient with me. You're listening
No,
to my arguments.
100%. So, Percy, so you would say you're a good person. I'm going to examine that using the Ten Commandments. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know any of them by any chance?
I know it's like thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. There is thou shalt not have any other God before me. There's also honor thy mother, thy father. What are the other ones? I know.
How about using God's name in vain?
Yes, that's
okay.
one of them.
I tell you what, you've mentioned all the ones I want to talk to you about.
Oh,
Okay. But I'm not going to do all
Sorry,
of
I
them.
missed the other couple.
No, don't you worry. I'm sure God is going to forgive you for that. So, let me ask you this. How many lies have you told in your whole life?
Probably a lot.
What do we call people when they do that?
Liars or storytellers.
Okay, fair enough. By the way, before I continue, I don't want you to think that I think I'm better than you. I failed the test myself. I just want to see how well you'll do. The second one you mentioned, believe it or not, was you shouldn't steal. Have you ever taken something that's not yours in the past since you were young? It doesn't matter of its value.
I don't think I have.
Do you think you could have?
I could have.
I mean, I can help you. I mean, if you download music on the internet without paying for it, that's
I
stealing.
don't do that.
Oh, cool. Watch videos, pirate it, or we should be
I
paying.
don't do that.
That's fair enough.
I'm very boring. I don't
That's
do
fair
much.
enough. You know, I believe you. Have you ever used God's name in vain? Said, "Oh my God," or
Yes,
JC?
I have.
And that's serious because that's using God's name as a swear word instead of honoring God with your words.
There can be, I've heard arguments about God's name in vain and how some people don't think that is a big deal versus like saying it in big, like more difficult purposes.
I see what you mean. It's like a prayer.
Yeah, it's that's more of an issue with different people's
I
interpretations.
understand that. Well, can we at least agree that you've used it in an inappropriate way at times, right?
Probably.
And that would be considered blasphemy. And we do one last one, and you mentioned this as well. Have you always honored your parents, listened to what they said?
Yes,
Always?
mostly.
Do you
Once
think?
again, this.
So that means you haven't, right? Mostly means sometimes you haven't.
By these standards, I'm probably not.
Well, I'm asking if you appear before God who can see everything, no doubt you've broken the other ones as well. Would you be innocent or guilty? Of breaking the law, His
His
standards?
I would say guilty.
Guilty.
Probably.
Tell me this. You've been honest with me so far. Heaven or hell for somebody who breaks the law? You know, God wants to uphold His righteousness. If He cares and if He's just, will He let a guilty person go free, or will He make sure justice is served?
Probably the justice is served.
Of course, because otherwise the definition of God just falls apart, doesn't it? He should be all just.
The thing is that the implication that we can follow any sort of perfection would mean that we would somehow be able to abide by perfection.
Right.
And since by God, we are sinful beings by birth.
Oh, wow, you're using Christian words. Are you brought up as a Christian?
Yeah.
Okay, are you a Christian? No, okay. Well,
I do know the theology.
you do know the theology. Well, I didn't want to go straight for sin at this stage. I was just pointing out that if there is a just God who cares about right and wrong, He'll make sure that guilty people pay for the crimes they commit. And the excuse of everybody's doing it, or the fact that I cannot be perfect, will not fly in the courtroom of a normal judge, never mind a godly judge.
I will say though,
Okay.
the fact that He put in like, if you see it literally or metaphorically, He put the tree in the garden, and He knew that Adam and Eve would see it constantly and be always have it in their peripheral. And if they didn't have knowledge of good and evil, even if He said, hey, like, this is bad, don't do that, how would they know it was wrong if they didn't have that knowledge yet? And of course, you could say they were manipulated by the snake, but they wouldn't have really known the consequences. They couldn't have, because they didn't have that knowledge yet. It seems like a bit of a contradiction.
Okay, you mean it's wrong for God to put some temptation in their way, and then they take it knowing they shouldn't do it?
No, it's not that they know that they shouldn't do it. It's the fact that they have no knowledge of that at all. You just put something and you say, don't do this, and you have no knowledge of consequences.
I think personally they would have, because our knowledge of right and wrong comes from a higher being. God decides what's right and what's wrong. And if He said it's wrong, then they should know it's wrong. Oh, disobedient. Let's put it this way, something you will understand. If your parents told you not to do something, but you don't understand it, it doesn't make you right when you do it. Right? Does that make sense? That works, right? Now, let me tell you this. If God were to uphold His justice, I know your brain is working away. You're
Sorry.
looking away because you're thinking about this. Okay.
I'm just like, oh,
How
yeah.
about this? I'm going to do this. If you're okay with this, I want you to do this. Work with me for now, and then when we get to the end, I want you to dish out everything you're thinking about, so that we don't get distracted, and then it's all yours. Then it's all yours.
That's kind of my deal. Is
That's
I'm
your deal?
distraction.
That's your bless
Sorry.
you. Don't you worry, because I know how your brain is working now. I got it. Okay, so if God upholds His righteousness, if He wants to make sure that all people who've done any kind of crime make sure they pay for their crimes, then He will make sure you and I
have a question before you just continue.
Even though we agreed we do it at
I
the
know,
end.
I'm sorry. Now I just want to say,
Okay,
hell is forever, yes?
I'm afraid so.
Okay, continue.
You want to know why?
Continue.
Okay.
No, you
All
can
right.
go.
Okay,
You got
bless
it.
you. Bless
I'm
you.
sorry.
Okay. So, so Percy, will it worry you if you were to die today and God gave you justice and you end up in hell? Would that worry you?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You may have misunderstood me. Would it worry you if you knew for sure you will die today and you'll end up in hell?
I don't know.
You wouldn't know?
Because the thing is, I don't know what hell's like. I know we have descriptions of it.
You
but
tell me.
It's fire and brimstone. Of course, there's Dante's Inferno and going through the different
That sounds
levels.
like a pretty awful place. Would you want to go there?
If I deserve it, maybe.
Would you like to be there for eternity? Would you not want mercy?
I would like mercy.
Okay, therefore you wouldn't want to go there. Agreed. So Percy, here's the deal. And at the end of this, I want you to dish out any thoughts you've got towards me, okay? You and I are guilty. We deserve to go to hell because God makes sure that the criminal pays for their crimes. He is an all-just God. The definition of God is that he is all-just, but he's also all-merciful. In fact, I want to give you the chance to tell me how you think God could reconcile his justice and his mercy at the same time. In other words, he wants to punish you, but he also wants to give you mercy. How can he make that work? What do you think he could do?
I think what he could do would be to offer, once proof is given of hell and judgment, to offer a way to stop once you get to those gates. And to see...
Help me understand what you just said. Stop? What does that mean?
So once you have died, your soul has gone somewhere, and you are at the very beginning of this next journey in your next life. And God tells you, this is your punishment for what you have done, everything that you have done. Here is a way that you can get out of your punishment later on.
To give you a second chance?
To give you a second chance.
I get that. Okay. Do you think this could be a second chance?
The thing is, if it does it that way, then there's never a knowledge of, like, it's completely faith-based. And to cross that line without knowing what's going to happen and where you're going.
So the hurdle here is you're not sure if hell exists or if God exists. That's where the hurdle is.
Yeah,
not the fact that he's giving you, not even whether he gives you a second chance. The second chance is his evidence that he exists as far as you're concerned.
I suppose part of it is that, but also just life and... Oh, thanks. You okay? Life and death is... Life and death are different things. Okay. Life and death are different things, and maybe in life things work differently than in death.
Can I tell you something?
And like, yeah, okay.
You see, if God is all just, he's just not going to overlook it. If he did it the way you just said, then this is what it'll look like. It'll look like a criminal who's been caught red-handed, committing a crime that's heinous. Imagine whatever crime you want. He appears before the judge, and the judge says, I tell you what, now that you know the consequence of committing that crime, you can go free, but don't do it again.
The thing is,
that's what it will sound like.
I'm still saying, like, punishment is happening.
Okay,
it's just, it's not eternal. That there is...
Eternal is a problem.
Eternal is a problem. Especially for something in a life that can only be at most, like, what's the oldest, 122 years to eternity?
Gotcha.
That seems a little unfair.
Let me tell you the answer then.
It's like a kid getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar and then their parents saying, okay, I'm going to whip you forever.
I understand. Okay, so here's the deal. And I understand the sentiment where it's coming from. It seems unfair. You do one lie and you end up in hell for eternity. It seems to be an incomparable punishment for what you're doing. There are two problems with this. Problem number one is that we're not understanding the seriousness of crimes that we commit against God. We're just dismissing that as a heinous crime as far as he's concerned. But let me tell you this, to understand the seriousness of the crime. So this is where I know your mind goes at 100 miles an hour and you're going to get distracted. But promise me for the next 60 seconds you don't do that. You ready? Can you do it? Okay.
I'll try my best.
Have you got brothers or sisters? Okay, sister? All right. Imagine you try to punch your sister and you miss. Will you get into a big trouble? Like you'll be like in prison or you end up being punished severely? No. Try this. You love your mother? Try this scenario. You go to punch your mother and you miss. Do you think the punishment will be greater for missing, for trying to punch your mother? Do you think that punishment will be greater than the earlier punishment with your sister? Would she actually kind of reprimand you a little bit? It will be a bit more serious, wouldn't it? How about this one? You run to a police officer. You run to a police officer and you try to punch him. And you miss. Do you think the consequence of that is more serious? Yes? Mm-hmm. I know you're resisting talking. Bless you. I'm loving this. Okay, the punishment is more serious, isn't it? You could go to prison. How about this? We had the king's coronation in England. Imagine you run towards that king while he was being coronated and you try to punch him and you miss. What will happen to you? You can talk now.
I'd probably get arrested immediately.
Maybe shot?
Yeah.
Because they see you coming, they say, oh, even though you missed, they'll probably shoot you somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so it sounds like who you commit the crime against dictates the severity of the punishment. We're saying you committed the crime against an eternal God when you lie, when you steal, when you blaspheme, and you've done all the others, by the way, but we've not gone through them. And we're saying that when we are
I haven't
committing
killed
this crime,
anyone.
and you know what the Bible says? If you hate somebody, you committed.
I don't hate anyone.
You have you severely disliked anyone?
Yeah.
That's hate, and therefore you've killed in your heart, right? You committed murder in your heart. So it appears that the standards are very high. That's why the punishment is very high. In fact, one last thing. In fact, God is showing you how great the crime is by showing you the consequence of that crime. It's so heinous in his eyes. Lying lips are abomination to him. Also stealing, the same thing. God is showing you the severity of your crimes by giving you a sentence that's very severe. Got it? Mm-hmm. Now here's the deal. You didn't tell me in a very just way how God could uphold his justice and mercy at the same time. So I'm going to tell you what he did. He came down himself in the person of Jesus to represent humanity, entered his own creation. He condescended himself. He humbled himself, entered into his creation to die willingly on the cross because the consequence of your crimes is death. And because it's death, he came in and took your place on the cross, and he paid the fine on your behalf. I know your brain is working 100 miles an hour right now, and you want to say something. But can I just finish this little bit? 30 seconds, and we're done. And now because God has done that for you, there was a legal exchange that took place. He took your crime, and he gave you his perfection. We call that his righteousness. Now when you appear before God on Judgment Day, even though you're guilty and you don't deserve it, he can let you go free because your punishment has been paid for by someone else. Someone else bailed you out. Someone paid the price of your crime. But now what you got to do to receive this free gift that you don't deserve, I don't deserve, nobody deserves. Just because we get it, it doesn't mean we deserve it. You need to repent and put your trust in Jesus. That's the only way, because repentance is a commandment, and faith in Jesus is the only way that's going to get you out, because that's the way God pays for your fine on your behalf.
But if we are made imperfect and then punished for that imperfection, is that really fair? As well as just
Wouldn't that be blaming God for your actions?
No, not my actions, but it's sins of the father, right? Like I had nothing to do with Eve or Adam, neither did you. And why should the fact that they chose to eat the apple then suddenly sully the rest of everyone else forever?
But Percy, wouldn't that sound like you're trying to say me lying and stealing was only as a result of somebody else's actions? Are you saying that we're unable to not lie and not steal? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm
saying
saying
that. Do you feel that you have to always lie and steal? No.
No, but that was placed in us, I suppose, by the fruit.
But do you feel that you have to lie and steal, and that's a good excuse for it? How about this one? A man rapes a woman, which we consider heinous. Man says, well, she was wearing provocatively. I couldn't help myself. Would that be an acceptable excuse?
No.
That's what you're doing. You're blaming somebody else's action for
but
your
it's
behavior.
Not someone actively here. It's the history of it. I think.
Are you able not to lie? Are you able not to lie?
Yes.
And when you lie, do you think you should face the consequence of that?
Not always, actually, because sometimes there's like there's moral relativism.
When you lie for selfish reasons, do you think you should face the consequence of that?
I suppose, but once again,
and that's it. You are to be blamed. Percy, when you appear before God on Judgment Day, you are not going to use those excuses. It's not going to work. You will not succeed. You know the best defense is that I am a wretched person and I don't deserve to get to heaven.
Okay.
But what is the answer?
That you have repented and you accept the righteousness?
No, it's because Jesus paid your fine on you, right? And because he paid your fine on your behalf, he can let you in because he bailed you out. He paid the price on your behalf.
What about the people before that?
That applies to everybody before, because he's the Messiah. Everybody knew about the Messiah coming and that he will come to save the world.
But there's also just the fact of, if God is our Father, would he not want to help us and save us no matter what, even if he humbles himself to that point?
Yeah.
I know my dad loves me as much as he can. He has this saying where it's like, I'll get the shovel, man. If I did something really bad, he'd help me no matter what. And is that not all accepting love?
You mean, is that his obligation? Isn't that his obligation? That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
isn't that what good parents do?
First of all, we're not children. And secondly, God is not our father until we repent and put our trust in him. He's our judge. But let's pretend everything you said was correct. You would smack a child when they touch the oven because you don't want them to do it again.
Well,
to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
part of it is they could learn from touching it themselves and go, I'm not going
Would
to
you
do that.
encourage them to touch it?
No.
That's it. And there you go. Okay, so Percy, God did everything for you. And the best thing you can do, you can ask the questions, of course. Ask all the questions you must. Receive the gift. He's giving you a gift you don't deserve. I don't deserve it. Take the gift and be humble about it, because God will not give that gift to somebody who's proud. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think, though, there's an issue that I'm having with the metaphor now that we're doing, where it's father of children, but with children, it's implied that they can learn and that they can get better. And I think that's implying for us, we can become perfect.
Right.
Like, and the thing is, it seems that we can never become perfect because sin is so intrinsic.
That is very interesting you said that. You know what the Bible says?
No.
The Bible says you go from glory to glory. God is changing you from the inside out. And the way you receive this gift, this ability to be going from glory to glory, is to become right with God. You reconcile yourself with God first. You know why?
But if the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and that gave us free will, right?
No, you see, here's the difficulty. This is the problem that people don't get. I'm happy to answer all your questions, but can I make it very clear? I'm going to answer the question in a minute. Can I make it very clear that what saves you is not knowing all the answers? What's going to save you is knowing the one answer that's going to get you there, which is repentance and faith in Jesus. Look, I encourage people to ask as many questions as they can. I'm going to answer that question. I don't want you to think I'm distracting you from it. I'm going to encourage people to get right with God first and then ask questions after. Not the other way around. Ask questions first and then repent and put your trust in Jesus after, because your life is at stake and you're gambling with it. God is not going to overlook your crime no matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you think. If you do a crime, He's going to make sure you pay the fine. But He's saying, because I love you, I'm doing it for you, because it rhymes.
Right.
Sometimes I make it happen.
No, it's
Okay, so do you like it? Okay, so Percy, let me answer some of your questions. But you promised me to take what I'm saying seriously.
yeah.
I don't want you to leave this place thinking that I won an intellectual discussion. I want you to leave this place thinking, I found salvation, I found eternal life. Okay, that's what I'm going to leave. Number one, God is not your father until you're reconciled with Him. You are His enemy. God says you're at enmity with God. I know it sounds great. You are enmity with God. Your carnal mind is offensive because you're doing things that are constantly offensive to Him. And He's saying, I'm your judge. When you appear before me, I'm going to pour out my wrath on you. But the moment you repent and you put your faith in Jesus, something different happens. Because you're now reconciled, you become His child. You become His child. So now He will reprimand you when you do something wrong. He's not going to throw you to hell because you're part of God's family. Make sense, Percy? Let me answer the other question, the question that probably you thought I'm trying to avoid. It's not that suddenly they knew the difference between good and evil. It's that good and evil was suddenly being decided by themselves rather than by God. Up to that point, it was God who decides right from evil, and now they wanted to say what's right and what's wrong. Isn't that what the world we live in right now? Relativism. I decide what's right and what's wrong. That is exactly what the devil has done in the Garden of Eden on the day they took from that fruit. The point I'm making is, that is what happens when God is no longer the authority. You become the authority and God finds that offensive. He says, you know what's right and wrong because I tell you what's right and wrong.
Okay.
Okay?
Here's where I was thinking, because I was going on the idea of the metaphor, and I didn't quite finish. And I think this is some of the problem that I'm having. God having us as children isn't quite the same thing, because it's implying, at least in life, like, oh, we can change, we can learn from this, we can no longer sin.
Can you just explain that again? Because I said we're not God's children until we repent and put our faith in Him. Are you saying?
We're God's creations.
I think this is going to help you. This analogy will help. Let's just say your father is a judge and you committed a crime and you appear before him in his courtroom. Should he let you go even though he's your father, or should he make sure you pay for the fine?
Pay for the fine.
That's right. And a good father would do what? He would pass the sentence and they say, fine is 100,000 and you should pay it. Otherwise you go to prison until you pay. That will be forever. But then a good father would step down and pay the fine for you. He steps down and pays the fine. That's what God did. He stepped down. He said, the sentence for your crime is eternal death in hell. But I will step down and pay it for you.
But still, I think part of it is just that's in an existing society, and that's something that for the law is concrete and is right and wrong. But if God created everything and He created what was right and wrong, and then created us, and we do right and wrong, or we do wrong from free will, and then punish us for that free will.
You see, Percy, you're thinking just not far enough. You're getting this far, but you're not getting further. Shall I?
Wait,
shall
I gotta
take-
finish. Wait, let me finish the
Okay.
metaphor, please. I'm
Sure,
sorry.
sure,
I'm
sure,
like,
sure. Go
wait,
for it, go for
I
it.
keep distracting myself, and then
Okay.
I distract you. So instead of being like a father and child, it's more like a human and their dog. Yeah, where when you
No, you know why that's not true?
why?
Because the Bible says that He made us in His image. Therefore, it can't be like a human and a dog. We
Oh,
have
no, like-
intrinsic value, so you can't make that analogy with human and a dog.
Dogs have intrinsic value. Dogs are wonderful.
Of course, you love them, but they don't have the same moral value as you do.
I think part of that too is maybe I just disagree on that, where it's like, how can anything have less value than me?
I'm not saying they have less value. I'm saying that God gave you a special kind of value because you're made in His image.
I don't know. Everything has this special kind of value.
Sure.
The world is
And
this
you're told to look after it.
wonderful
And you're told to look after it. You know, dogs are beautiful animals. I love dogs. I love trees. I love those things that God created. But you have a moral value. If I had to choose between setting that tree on fire or killing you, it would be saving you because you have an intrinsic moral value. If I saw a dog drown and I saw Percy drown, I will jump in and rescue Percy because Percy has got an intrinsic moral value made in God's image, and God declared that you have value.
Why create stuff that doesn't have the same value?
Maybe He did it for your pleasure. Maybe He created all these things for your pleasure so you can enjoy them. So let me do one more. Let's just say you're living in a house.
I don't know if I like that idea of pleasure, where it's like
Well,
whole living other beings, whole other creatures that have their own world, their own lives, even if they've never seen a human being before in their life. This idea that we're the ultimate, and that feels.
So think about it like this: you live in a home, and your parents walk in one day, and they get you a television. That television is not more valuable than you. You are more valuable than the television, but they do it for your fun, for your pleasure. Do you see what I'm saying?
But a television isn't alive.
It's true, but that doesn't change the fact that the television is something you love. So the point I'm making is everything has value, but you have special value because God declared it. If you don't want it, that's fine. You don't have to have it. But the point is that you're made in God's image. So you can't, the reason I said this is because you're comparing yourself to a dog when you said it's like having a dog. You're giving me an analogy between God and between you and a dog as an analogy between God and a human. That's not the relationship. That is not the relationship you have with God. You are a moral agent responsible for your actions, and God is going to make sure that every action has been accounted for, whether it's thought, word, or deed. And your response should be, I'm a wicked person, and if God were to give me what I deserve, I'll go to hell. I will take the gift He gave me. Take it. Percy, take it.
I will say, I am a flawed person, as everyone is. Everyone has this.
And that's why you need a savior. Nobody's perfect. That's why we need somebody to rescue us. And He came in and He did it in person. To reject that will be like spitting at His face.
But all of these other animals that have like their own lives, they can feel happiness and sadness and heartbreak. Like there was that whole thing of the orca who carried around her dead calf.
So
for
why do you
weeks
think
and weeks
why do you think
afterwards.
that's relevant for you not going to hell? Are you worried that dogs will go to hell?
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't
fine.
want dogs
Let's
to go
just
to
say-
hell.
let's just say
I don't
dogs won't go to hell.
So the thing is, does that mean they don't have an afterlife?
So
Does that mean that God doesn't care as
This
much
is
about
so-
dogs?
this is such
that
a
dogs
tangent.
they don't matter.
This is such
that
a tangent.
dolphins don't
Okay, so
matter.
let me answer the question for you. Let me answer the question. I'm going to have to wind it down.
I know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So you are
I go long.
a descendant of
Oh.
Adam. A descendant of Adam. You have a soul, you have a spirit, and you're responsible for your actions, and therefore you're morally accountable. Therefore you'll face judgment. Dogs are not morally accountable. If cats eat a rat, it doesn't make them a criminal. So therefore they don't face God's judgment in the way you're thinking. You will face judgment when you kill, but a cat doesn't face judgment when the cat kills because
But
it's
we
not a
eat-
moral agent.
We eat other animals.
Before
and
we
that's-
continue, God didn't design it that way. God made us vegetarians. Read Genesis chapter 1 and you'll see. So, Percy, these questions are great and I can answer every single one of them with great detail. My problem is that you're going to go to hell if you don't do anything. It's up to you. And I want you to make the right decision because I care. I care about you. Do it today. If you don't do it today, you're gambling every single day until the day you die. It's the worst gamble of your life. You wouldn't gamble with your money, you wouldn't gamble with your house, you would not gamble with anything, but you're gambling with your soul and there is nothing more precious. God thought it was precious enough to come down and pay the fine for you. we do promise to at least think about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was very nice
It's a
talking to
pleasure
you.
talking to you.